part of this planning process. So please ask questions, visit with the guys before you leave. They've got maps and everything. So to start us, I'm going to introduce Mr. Bob Barber. He kind of started this project with us, and he's going to get us started. Thank you.
Alice, thanks. It's really good to be back in Perigold. I've been in and out of Perigold about 3 or 4 or 5 times now, associated with the project and getting us up and running through Discover Paragould 2042. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me in the back?
You're going to have to stay near this one for this.
Oh, shoot, I can't stay still.
You can hold it. You can walk with it. Okay.
Move around. That's hard for me to stay in one spot. All right, so yes, we were very fortunate to be engaged by the Economic Development Group to facilitate a process called Discover Paragould 2042. And just tell you a little bit about what we're doing and what's going to happen. We'll spend about an hour with you, 45 minutes to an hour. We scheduled an hour and 15 if we need that, but we'll spend the next few minutes with you introducing what the project is. We'll introduce ourselves, we'll introduce what the project is, and we'll describe its objectives and why it's important to the future of the city. You're here in a community kickoff meeting, so we want exposure, we want broad community participation. We're not generating a plan just over in a huddle and throwing it on the table. We're trying to gather inputs into the process. And so this is the community kickoff meeting, and it's ending a day of focus groups that we have had for various community development topics, and we'll have some engagement exercises for you to participate in as the meeting concludes, and of course we can discuss any aspect of the project. So welcome. We're glad you are here. Our group is Orion Planning and Design, and we are a planning and design firm, small. We're spread out across the country, and we facilitate cities in their planning processes throughout the country. I'll introduce my colleagues, or I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves in just a moment. If you wanted to see anything we've done or where we've been or whatever, you could go to our website, orionplanningdesign.com, and you'll get a portfolio of various efforts and initiatives, and this map indicates sort of where we've been across the country. Very happy to be in Perigold. The dialogue we've experienced, the hospitality has been very, very good. This is our partners. There are 6 of us. You'll hear from 2 more besides myself. Bert Kirkendall is from Chattanooga as an engineer and a mobility planner. Allison Malk is from Missoula, Montana. She is an architect and a planner. I'm from the Memphis area, Bob Barber, and then Oliver Seabolt is an urban designer from St. Simons, Georgia. 2 of our other partners are not here, but they'll be participating in the project. Now, I've already said it's really good to be in Perigold because each time I come, and our team is beginning to experience it now, we hear lots of and see lots of evidences of energy, of community interest and vitality, lots of strategizing on how to make the community better. In the process of getting acquainted with Perigold, I stumbled across the Perigold Podcast, which I've complimented a number of times because it's really good if you're into podcasts. It's one of the better small-town podcasts, one of the best I've listened to across the country. Very well done. But all of your new initiatives, the 8 Mile Creek Trail, some of the new development, your emphasis on downtown, all setting the stage for a vital a community and a better Perigold going forward. Now, what specifically are we doing? We are updating a comprehensive city plan. It's actually a legal tool that's set out in Arkansas law, and you'll see a summary of that on the right-hand side of the slide. The comprehensive city plan takes into account that very thing, a comprehensive set of community development circumstances and conditions, such as environment, land use, mobility, economy, and it projects the best ideal growth pattern for the community going forward into the future, for development and redevelopment and preservation and conservation. All of these things are included in a comprehensive plan. What is the usefulness of the plan? It drives the way the city makes development decisions through its coding. There's a zoning code, subdivision controls, various rules that govern the way things develop. So it drives that. It also drives public investment. And if it's well done, it drives private investment because we can generate interest in the community and private investment in certain ways. So that's what the comprehensive plan is doing. We're updating a 2003 model. So it's been about 20 years since you've engaged in this exercise. The life cycle of one of these documents is, at a really good life cycle, will be 10 years. So you're well due for an update of the plan. That's the facts of what we're doing. Now we have a particular approach. Our approach, I'll mention two components to the way we approach facilitating a community planning process. Number one, we understand and we know a city to be a community to be a connected set of systems. It's like an ecology, so that everything is connected and impacts another thing. For instance, the way the streets are laid out, designed, their speeds and so forth impacts the kind of development that happens on either side of the street. Even underneath that, the very ground itself, the nature of the soil, the way the water flow, all of that impacts the way the street's designed, which impacts the way the development works on the other side of it. And then if we throw in the economy, we know the way the economy functions and its opportunities impacts the people that move here, and the people that move here impact the development. It's all connected is my point. And I think you can see that point. So we want to understand those systems, and we want to see how they interact with one another, because there are strategic points that you can guide and manage for the benefit of the city overall going forward. There's another fundamental component to the way a city works. A city has a life cycle. It is born, it grows, it plateaus, matures, declines, and it eventually can die, although it may take centuries to do so. Now, even within the context of an entire city, there are different parts of the city that are experiencing various. Some neighborhoods are being born, some neighborhoods are in decline. We need to understand where Perigold is in the life cycle and understand what parts of the city need to be cared for in different kinds of ways. That's a part of our approach that we use. And we carry it out in the steps that you see here. There's a discovery process where we study the community. We open up this dialogue with the community, which is what we're doing now. And we'll convey some of that initial information in a moment. There is a step of direction where we begin to, based upon what we learn, facilitate what is your vision of Perigold going forward. What will your community be like? What do you want it to be like in a 20-year time period for your kids, grandkids, for yourself? That question is asked. Then we will generate a plan, illustrated plan for achieving that, and then in the fourth step we begin to recommend how the plan is implemented, because if it's not implemented, we've all had a good time hopefully, but we hadn't achieved anything. So step 4, and then beyond that you monitor the process and keep it flowing. So that's your introduction to the city planning process. it's important because we want you to know, we think it's important to convey the approach because we want you to know what you're doing is important as a city. It's a very important thing. The quality of your community 20 years from now will be in large part attributed to the decisions you make today and over the next few years. So it's an important thing. What we have done is begun this initial discovery process, and we want to convey some of the just high level to get us thinking about Perigold in the same way, about the environment and about your development patterns and the mobility systems and the economy and some of your assets and amenities over the next few minutes.
Thanks, Bob. This is on. Okay. Wonderful. That's better. I always get self-conscious when I'm talking into a microphone. So, none of what I'm about to tell you all should be a shock or something you don't already know, I hope. But I think it's important, and as Bob explained, that you understand kind of where we're starting as a baseline and understanding your community. None of us live here. But we really need to kind of get a handle on the constraints, the opportunities, both physically, geographically, geologically, to be able to help visualize where future growth and development is appropriate. And so the first thing we do is look at the geography, look at the environment, look at where we're sitting right now today. And you have a fairly unique circumstance. You may not know that Crowley Ridge, the formation to our west that Perigold sits kind of on the eastern edge of, is one of two geologic formations in the entire world, the other one being in Siberia. So this is where you and I have a good connection, not because I live in Siberia, although right now it kind of feels that way. But Montana is a place being currently formed by glaciers, and Perigold is a place that is historically formed by glaciers. And so that I'm going to mispronounce it, but the Loess soils that form Crowley Ridge are fairly unique. You also have the new Madrid Fault and its relationship to kind of this geographic formation. So all of that creates a really neat, interesting environment. You know, when I think of eastern Arkansas, my experience in places like West Memphis is it's flat and it's floodplain. But you've got a great geography to work from and a really desirable place to be. Now, thinking about just overall health indicators and how the environment influences it, you'll see there's a rating score. This is qualitative and quantitative together, but looking at sort of how some of the impacts to your health, to the environmental health, coincide. You've got safe drinking water, but you'll note the score in terms of population, location, and proximity to parks and recreation opportunities, creating that healthy lifestyle, pretty low. You're about 6 percentage points below the median average nationally. You're also really hot. You have more hot days, extreme heat per year than most places by about 3 additional days. So those are just sort of some overall considerations in terms of decision points, considerations for people who might be moving here, for people who might be contemplating leaving here. That impacts growth trends over time. So I also have that ringer. Great choice. So what we do know, and what is quite obvious based on your location, is you have a lot of floodplain. And wetlands, and that's kind of what this map shows, and there's maps in the back of the room if you want to poke around and kind of look at how the floodplain applies to the community. But there's a lot of wet places, and what that means is that there's an increased level of flood risk. You've got about just over 1,500 homes and buildings that would be impacted. That's about 20% of your developed area that has a higher percentage rate of being impacted by a flood event in the future. And we know that flood events are getting a little bit more frequent, and that's exacerbated by kind of extreme rain events, and that's also exacerbated by increased impervious surface related to development. So it's this cycle that's interrelated and that we need to be aware of as we're thinking about how Perigould's going to grow and develop into the next 10 or 20 years. So there are a lot of numbers on this slide, and I'm not going to go over them, but basically what it's saying is with increased impervious surface, aka development, the rate of runoff is higher, it's more intense, it happens more quickly. When you have a forested ecosystem, a forested area, you'll see that runoff rate is 10% in the top left corner there. If you go to a fully developed site where 75 to 100% of it is converted into impervious surface area, you're increasing that runoff rate fourfold. So that's something that's important for us to consider when related to the amount of floodplain and wet, low-lying areas in and around Perigold. And of course that intensity, that rate of runoff impacts site development. You have when you have stream banks, you get excessive erosion. When you have high rates of runoff, high intensity runoff. And so all of these are development considerations moving forward. All right. Bob?
So on top of that natural environment, some of those key features that we're just touching the surface of, we then begin to want to understand how the city itself is formulated, or how it's arrayed, where are the various kinds of developments in the community, and how are they configured across the landscape. The commercial development, shopping areas, industrial areas, where are your neighborhoods, and so we can understand how all this fits together. So we're just beginning this existing land use analysis. This is a map. There'll be a hard copy you can look at in the back later if you're interested in that. How do the parts fit together? We begin to know that different areas of Perigold serve particular functions, so that we can understand sort of this rural western edge here, and in this core shopping, suburban shopping area, the corridors, the industrial areas, the downtown, and some of the redevelopment neighborhoods begins to help us understand how the community functions. Very interesting thing about when we begin to analyze the way the community is developed, half the land in Perigold, 50%, is devoted to agricultural and forestry uses, which is an extraordinarily high amount for a city the size of Perigold. But there are other elements there as we begin to look at the configuration of the city and how the land is used. And then how are all those parts connected via the mobility system?
Yeah, so mobility is very, very tied to land use and the way that development works, the way that neighborhoods work. So we're going to be looking, really taking a comprehensive look at the transportation system, streets, sidewalks, bike facilities, greenways, and how people move around town, and really developing, looking what's happening, looking at current plans, and really developing a plan to make Perigold better connected. So, you know, in this example of a project we're doing in Montana and Whitefish, which is looking at side paths, greenways, bike lanes, ways to connect the city together, the way to connect kids to schools. Used to 80% of our kids walked and biked to school, now it's less than 20%, and there are a lot of negative effects of that. But also for just being able to walk and bike to a neighborhood park. But it's also about our streets too. But walkability is a good measure. This is from a website called WalkScore. It's a really interesting website, and it will rate your town, your neighborhood in terms of walkability. So Perigold currently has about a 23 walk score. That's out of 100. Bike score of 30. But a lot of that is because the areas outside the core of the city are not walkable. If you zoom into the core, you get to the downtown, it's pretty walkable. It's up in the 80 and 90 range. The neighborhoods around it are in the 50 to 70 range. Walkability is not just about sidewalks, it's about things to walk to. So it's about density of uses. It's about being able to walk to the store, being able to walk to a park, to a school. So that's one way that transportation and land use really come together. But also we're looking at existing data. This is Strava data. If any of y'all use Strava, you can also look on their website and download these heat maps that tells you where people are walking and biking in your neighborhood, in your community. So this is the highlighted red is for walking. And you can see a lot happening downtown, a lot of activity on Court Street and the streets around it. You kind of see some circuits, people walking and running downtown. You can see the Western bypass. A lot of folks are using that to run on, and a lot of tracks, a lot of circulation within neighborhoods. I saw one neighborhood, I think it's right here. It's I think it's near the country club. So it's a cul-de-sac and smaller cul-de-sacs, and people are actually walking each cul-de-sac all the way down, all the way back. And because it's their neighborhood, but really they're kind of isolated here, right? They can't connect to a park, so they're walking their neighborhood. That's happening a lot in these neighborhoods. People are walking and biking. And this is the biking map. But basically, that's one goal, is to try to better connect neighborhoods to each other, to the greenways, to parks, so just give people more options to walk and bike around town. This is the bike map, so it's a lot bigger. There are bigger routes happening. People are riding out in the country, but still there's activity downtown. There's activity in neighborhoods. There's a lot of activity on the bypass where there's that paved shoulder. So that's an example of a road that was built that took that into mind. It created a place where people could actually walk and bike within the city. And we'll be looking at streets too. So this is an example in Chattanooga that I worked on. And the idea is to help create new streets or transform existing streets to become complete streets, streets that serve all users. So at one point, this was one way, 4 lanes in one direction, then 2-way. And then we transformed it to handle people driving, parking, walking, biking. But also, it's about that edge to the street. It's about development that happens right on the sidewalk that creates a really great space. And it's about traffic calming. So this on-street parking, tightening, making the lanes narrow, it slows cars down, which is really important when you're trying to create a walkable corridor.
So all of this is obviously happening within a demographic and an economic context. In the next few slides, we'll just outline some key summary facts about Perigould's demographic and economic situation. I've already mentioned the growth of Perigold, and you're aware of the growth of Perigold. This curve will take you from 1990 to 2020. And actually, as I looked all the way back to the turn of the century, there has not been a decade when Perigold has not grown. It's always grown since it's been a city, as best I can determine. This is Greene County, the orange line on the top, but Perigold on the bottom, and you see that growth rate flattening slightly over the last decade. But certainly we haven't projected growth yet, but you can expect some significant growth over the next 20 years, and we'll be looking more into that. This gives the population by 5-year age increments, and let me explain the chart to you. The top was the age increment in 2010. And the bottom, the blue line, is the age increment in 2020. And as you look at that, we make a couple of observations. Number one, we see in both decades the population sort of dip in the 20, 30, 40 age range. People are leaving and not coming back in it, but eventually they do come back, and then there's growth occurring. In general, we would call this a fairly healthy population curve. If it was unhealthy, you would have far fewer young people and a lot more old people, and you could expect your community to decline. That's not the case in Perigold. However, I will point out, you look at this bulge right here, that indicates an aging of the population. Perigould's no different than the country as a whole and other communities. In fact, the median age has increased over the last decade about 2.5 years. Significant, and that will likely increase again. We also know that families do not form at the rate they once did. People have less children, and Perigold will be affected by that as well in general terms. So one more little fact here. Over the decade, people aged 50 and above increased by 2,000. There's 2,000 more older people over the last 10 years than before. Employment, this will be no surprise to you. We highlighted in red the 4 highest components of the employed population, the largest being manufacturing. Perigold is evident in our tour today. Your success in developing your industries, manufacturing employs the most people, followed by healthcare, and then that's followed by the retail trade, and then the 4th is educational services, and then there are other elements in there as well. So we're very aware of the manufacturing base of Perigold's economy, and we take a look at those workers where they come and go. This will indicate in Perigold imports almost 11,000 people to come to work. It exports about 6,600. So you're a net job generator in the city limits of Perigold. 5,000 people live here and work here. That's Greene County. Greene County as a whole is just sort of balanced, 9 in, 9 here, and 9 out. Sort of balanced overall. Pretty interesting. Top employment destinations, again, no surprise to you, is Jonesboro by far. You've got 2,500 people leaving Perigold daily to go to work in Jonesboro. And the heat map on the right will show you in purple where Perigold people are going to work across the region. The bottom right-hand corner there will give you a sense of incomes. This was somewhat of a surprise to us. Median household income, that means half the people make more than the number and half the people make less. Perigold is actually above Jonesboro. I was not expecting that. I thought it would have a slightly lower median household income. And it is slightly lower than Arkansas as a whole, but it's kind of right in the realm of Arkansas. Arkansas's median household income. Finally, this will indicate retail, just a retail snapshot. Without going into too much detail here, what this tells us, everything that's highlighted in yellow is a deficit in retail sales. If you look at the green number up top there, that's $100 million of excess retail sales in Perigold than you would expect. In other words, you're importing business from all around. It's a retail center to some degree. But there are some deficits in the yellow, and they're mostly concentrated around specialty stores and specialty items, sporting goods, electronics, and those kinds of things. So we'll be looking at what that means for retail space, shopping areas, and future retail opportunities. The last 2 slides here will deal with the housing, a little bit of information on the housing. 43% of Perigold's housing, all these houses right here, are aged 40 years and older. Now, the life cycle of a single-family home is about 50 years or so, give or take, depends on how it's taken care of, as with anything else in life. But what that means when we look and think about the future of the city, it speaks to some of your neighborhoods where you've been enforcing codes and removing dilapidated housing and the need for redevelopment and how can some of those neighborhoods redevelop. All of those issues rise to the surface on this type of information. 60% owner-occupied housing in Perigold, 40% renter, and 75% of the homes are single-family detached homes. There is more than a typical community would have in the duplex, than the quadplex, where a lot of those units have been built and scattered around the community. So just a little bit about the economic context, and then recreation amenities.
Yes, so we're looking at the current inventory of recreation facilities, and that's both active spaces and passive spaces. So active spaces being programmable athletic fields, facilities like this, and also passive spaces, spaces where you can be by the lake, where you can be on a trail, be in the woods. Maybe you're in town, but you can, walk to a place and be in the green. So inventorying those places and also looking at where they are, and looking at the importance of having, park spaces near neighborhoods, near parks, and looking at some opportunities to expand the system, and whether that's looking at expanding current facilities or looking at new locations for potential parks and rec facilities. So we'll be looking at that and factoring that into the process.
Thank you. Okay, so as part of this process, an advisory group has been established to help represent kind of larger themes of the general public, to walk us through the planning process, to vet concepts and ideas as we move through this over the course of the next year. So before we arrived on site this week, that group was surveyed to get a sense of, are these baseline trends, are these things that we're seeing based on the quantitative data correct? What are your opinions about the future of Perigold and what we need to focus on? So I'm going to summarize. The survey was a lot longer than 3 questions, but I'm going to summarize the salient points here for you. When asked about favorite places and spaces, what they really valued about the city, the community, by far, the most repeated answer had to do with parks and recreation opportunities that exist. That's Crowley Ridge, that's the Country Club, that's the community center right here, and of course the 8 Mile Trail that's under development. Those things came up repeatedly as not only assets, but places that are of true value to the community members. The other repeat answer was Main Street in downtown Perigold. And the activity and redevelopment that we walked through today and kind of understanding what the future holds makes a lot of sense, that those places and spaces are going to be of high importance as we move forward. In terms of assets, which there's a lot of overlap, but location based, on the regional importance, the Perigold's location in relation to Jonesboro and Northwest Arkansas, Northeast Arkansas. That was important, and that's seen as an asset, something that can be built upon and might have value in terms of looking at growth and development potential in the future. Downtown obviously came up. Progressive leadership and kind of the mindset and approach to growth was seen as a huge asset right now. You, of course, have great schools and school districts, and that's of huge importance in terms of attracting young families and professionals that are thinking of starting families. And the industrial base. I think Bob brought it up in his slides on the economy. The existing manufacturing and industry that provides a really great economic baseline for residents in Perigold was seen as a great asset. You're safe. Again, Parks and Rec came up. You've got a good healthcare system, and the city-owned utilities provide affordability aspects to quality of life. But I want to point out that there was a real consensus about the small-town community feeling and the fact that Perigold's residents themselves were assets, not only to the community, but certainly we see it as an asset to this process moving forward. And of course, with assets and opportunities, we also have to weigh our challenges. And so these were some of the challenges that were brought forth repeatedly in that survey. Growing diversity, I want to clarify that when it says growing diversity, it means diversity of the demographic and the type of people, the different types of family structures that have different needs. So, for instance, as Bob pointed out, the aging population. You have seniors that are going to have very different needs in terms of their lifestyle, quality of life, housing opportunities than a young family or even a young professional that's just starting out and that may be looking at Perigold for the beginning of their career. So we're talking about diversity in stages of life and how that's going to be challenging, and we heard a lot today from our stakeholder groups about housing stock, availability, affordability, some of the workforce challenges that have come up. Property decline and blight was brought up as an ongoing issue, and we've heard a little bit about the enforcement measures in place, but that's a concern. That'll be a challenge. Proximity to Jonesboro, both an asset, but also you have competing economies and how to balance, what's happening in Jonesboro and how it impacts Perigold and its economic future. Change is, of course, hard for everybody, and so through the survey we heard that there may be some resistance to change just because change can be uncomfortable, so that's a consideration. And then a lot of really astute observations in terms of growth impacts, balancing that growth with the need to provide quality infrastructure, housing affordability and attainable options, maintaining and attracting a workforce to take advantage of a lot of that economic opportunity that you have, which is really great. And making sure to be mindful of, an increasing gap between the wealthy and those that may be less fortunate, and how, our economy locally, regionally, nationally is creating those imbalances. So our directive, one of the final questions was sort of what is a major focus, what should be a major focus of this project. And these are ranked, but you will very clearly see that of the options provided to the group, redevelopment and revitalization of aging parts of the city rose to the top of the pack pretty easily. And when we asked for a little bit more nuanced answers to that question, again, you'll see the overlap. Main Street reinvestment, additional housing, maintaining public safety, providing economic opportunity, business growth and development support, as Bert was talking about, improving those multimodal connections and transportation connections throughout the city generally, focusing on those design aesthetics, opportunities for kids and older families, connection to Jonesboro, and I think as we were just talking about, the need for all of this to be implementable. If we come out of this process with a really lovely plan, and as Bob said, we had a great time, that's wonderful. But our goal is to provide a strategy that you can carry forward when we all leave, that will help you realize the vision that we create together. So, with that.
So, part of the process of formulating the strategy is to have you tell us, because we're really in a position right now of listening. We want to know. We've heard from the focus group, as you've seen. The advisory group. We had some focus groups today. We met, discussed the natural environment, we discussed neighborhood character, and we discussed the local economy, mobility, infrastructure, and what am I missing? One other one. We had 6 focus groups. They were excellent discussions. So this is the opportunity for you to tell us, and we've designed this for your cell phone. I hope everyone brought their cell phone. If you did not, we can make arrangements to do this on hard copy in the back. So I want to walk you through an exercise to tell us what you think. And here's what we'd like to ask you to do. You can either scan that code on the card on the table, or you can scan that on the screen there, and you'll go directly. If you scan the card, you're going to go to the website. I'm going to give you step 2 of how to get to where we're going. If you scan the screen, you'll go directly to where we're going. So So those of you that are scanning the card, or if you want to type in discoverparagould2042.com, you can get there that way. If you get to the project website and you get your little menu button up to the right, you click it down, hit the button that says Engage. And you should have gone directly to the map. Did you get directly to the map? Okay. Ultimately, and I may have to call on my partners here to help anybody that needs any help. Ultimately, you're going to get to a screen that looks like this. Discover Paragould 2042 participation map. Give me a nod or a wink or throw a card at me if you're there. Anybody not there? Everybody get there? Everybody get to the map? Yeah, click on the computer. All right, now here's what we want to do. Once you're there, you're going to do 3 steps. First, you're going to, we'd like you to identify up to 3 assets and 3 opportunities. An asset is this, something great about Perigold that you are all in on, you think is wonderful about the community, you want to see it maintained, it's just a good community thing. An opportunity is a spot where there's an opportunity for some improvement. Maybe we need to upgrade something or give attention to this. Here's an opportunity. It's a nice way of identifying places where we need to pay attention to. So you do 3 assets and 3 opportunities. And the way you enter them is this. You'll select this and you'll pick asset or opportunity, write in a comment. We need to comment. Don't just pick it and not tell us what it is. I love Reynolds Lake Park. Never let it go away, or whatever you're going to say. Then, on the map, you can zoom in, find the approximate location of Reynolds Lake Park, tap the screen, you'll drop a pin there, and hit submit. And you're done. Yes. Pull down on the menu. Right there.
Go to the top.
Okay. Is everybody with me? Do we have any Zoomers? They got it. They got the link. So we've got some folks on Zoom. Welcome to the Zoom people. We're recording for Zoom. All right. So as you do this, it takes 5 or 10 minutes to do it. Everybody okay with what they're doing? Drop 3 assets. Drop 3 opportunities. We're going to see real time, hopefully, if the technology works, what you're doing. There you go. You're filling them up. Okay. Excellent. Yep, y'all are great. You're also very quiet. Yes. When you drop your pen, hit submit. There you go. Now go up. There you go. This little method of doing this, by the way, is a result of the pandemic when we had to, we used to kind of crowd around tables and put dots on. And we still do that some, but. This is an incredibly studious group. I'm impressed. It's very. Oh, wow. Very good. So, as you're continuing on there, we're going to leave this this exercise up for about a week or two. Let's just say 2 weeks, and so the entire community can participate in what we're doing this way, and we've got the remote viewers doing it as well. So we'll give it another couple of minutes.
There were two things, the assets and the...
Opportunities.
Okay, how do we get back to that screen? I did the assets, I can't get back to the opportunities screen. Try that. All right, thank you.
All right, I don't want to prolong us too long, but I see several people still.
Question.
Yes.
When the pins are drawn,
Yes.
are the blue or the go, which is assets and which are
I
opportunities?
think I hadn't looked at the legend. I think the blue was the opportunity.
Okay.
All right, so you can, when you get home, as you think of more things, that will be available to you to drop a pin. We will look at every one of those comments. I mean, this is meaningful public input to us, and we can, at the risk of let's see, downtown. Okay, there's an asset, downtown, pin dropped. Here's another asset, Perigold School District, reaffirming that. Another asset, the 8 Mile Creek Trail. No comment on that one. Remember to put your comments in when you drop them. Came here from Memphis, loved the community. We were not looking at them all. Some of the opportunities, no comment there. You got to put your comments in. Okay. Oh, no, there's a comment. No more. Need more entry places. Okay. There was no comment. New housing development, etc. We'll analyze all of those comments, and they're available to you. You can view the comments, what your friends and neighbors are saying about Perigold as you go forward. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We will continue to gather that input. It's the very thing that we wanted to do. Our intention was to introduce the project to you, just provide some of the high-level initial data, which will be uploaded to the project website and available to the community, and then begin to enter into this dialogue with Perigold, the community at large. This is the method we use for that. We can stop now because we're at a point where we can have any questions or discussion before we kind of wrap up and dismiss. Questions? I know there's a question in this room. I'm 100% certain of it.
Well,
See there, I knew there was a question.
just that will this be shared online anywhere where people that missed the meeting could see what they missed? Or
Great question. And yes, it will. Allison's recording on Zoom. We'll post everything that we just did. Thank the students. It's really great opportunity here to have the students with us, and they're filming it, and I guess it's going on YouTube or somewhere.
Okay.
But anyway, we'll post the meeting,
Okay.
and the interaction will stay up. So
Okay.
yes,
Good.
yes,
I have one.
yes,
So you've done this in several cities.
yes, ma'am.
What do you see as the viable things that Perigold needs to do to incorporate and to grow and to prosper?
That is an excellent question. And we see some things, but we're not ready to show them. They're not fully formulated. We're still listening. But I can tell you this for certain, that the underlying thinking, just driving through Perigold, one would not recognize the quality of the underlying thinking about the future of the community, if that makes sense. Some of the assets that do rise immediately to the surface, I think some of the maps will show opportunities for your park connectivity, kind of centered around 8 Mile Trail, the vibrancy going on downtown, the success, the vitality in the manufacturing sector, the quality of the schools, all lend themselves to, they're all components of a potentially super community. And you already have a really great community. Now, I have to couple that with challenges, because we see those challenges too. We've discussed neighborhood, and we did that life cycle. You've got some neighborhoods that are in decline, that have some redevelopment challenges that are ahead, expanding on your downtown revitalization, those kinds of things. Some of the, and this came up in our neighborhood our community character meeting today, some of the visual appeal of some of the streetscapes would be candidates for improvement, those kinds of things. So that's a very general answer, but we don't want to prejudge any of it because we're in the kind of the information gathering. However, we would be in agreement with most everything we saw in the survey. I mean, we're tracking along with the thought process there. Did I make sense? Sometimes I ramble in my answers. So, good. Great question. Great question. Yes, sir.
Whenever you were forming these focus groups and these surveys, what demographics were making up those teams? Was it just city officials, or was it like a culmination of the population?
It was a broad cross-section of groups that people that formulated the advisory group. However, let me stress, the advisory group is just giving us some rails to run on. They're not necessarily making the hard decisions. The community, ultimately, this is vetted with the community, which is why we're doing this meeting. And there will be a community survey for the entire community to give input.
That's more what I was asking. Is it
Yeah.
going to expand into
Absolutely.
every vein of the city?
Yes, and that's a good point. And a tool like this allows us to offer everybody the opportunity to give input, but we will have a more specific community survey. Yes, good question. Others?
That I want to say I appreciate because the broad foundation that gets us thinking about things we don't normally think about.
Yes, I appreciate this also.
A lot of good information.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
A while ago, you had one of the graphs up that showed the level of duplexes.
Yes.
And you also have declining neighborhoods.
Right.
And what I'm seeing a lot in this town is in our neighborhoods, declining homes, single-family residential, are being replaced by duplexes.
Right.
Which promotes transient living that ultimately has an effect on the houses around it and lends to more transient.
Yes.
Is that something you will look at and really?
Yes, yes, sir. And it really, I showed that earlier. I didn't spend much time on the existing land use map, but we code every parcel of ground and we begin to see that pattern pop up in interesting places, I'll put it that way. And it's like, something's happening, what's going on here? And then we find out, the removal of dilapidated houses and replacement with this other form of house. Long and short of it, yes, we very much will look at that issue because it's important for Perigould's future. Yes.
Kind of the process from here to the end.
I do. I had a last slide. I'm not going to take time to put it back up there. So, yes, Mayor. Thank you. So the process is this. We're in, if you'll remember my first slide, I'm sure everybody has it etched into their memory. Step number one is discovery. We're kind of opening. We've been working with Allison and the city, but we're kind of opening this up now. So we're in discovery. We will continue to refine our database and our inputs over the next roughly 2 months. We will then come back with step two, where we're looking for refining into direction and vision. And that will involve what we call a planning week. We'll have our team back. We'll spend a week with you. And based upon our discovery, we will, through a series of exercises, ask you to plan the future of the city. Where will the new neighborhoods be? Where will we revitalize? How will we do this? We'll do that in a public forum on a Monday evening. We'll work through the week, and we'll have a concept plan presented back at the end of the week. That'll be in the summer. We don't have the dates yet. After that, we will formulate the specific plan and strategy and present it to the decision makers for consideration and approval. That'll be steps 3 and 4. We'll have an implementation strategy, and by that time we'll be over in the fall, and you'll be looking at a document for consideration as a plan. Did that answer it clear enough? I felt like I stumbled on it a little.
Excuse my ignorance, but who has hired you? Who commissioned this study?
The Economic Development Commission. Yes, sir. All right.
Short question.
Yes.
Are you wanting input from Perigold residents only, or anybody that's in Greene County, because we kind of all come to Perigold for downtown, or?
I think any meaningful input we can get is useful, and we will review it all. The folks that are within the city limits of Perigold, I'm guessing, have a greater stake in the community than perhaps those around it. Nonetheless, any meaningful input and ideas we're wanting to hear. Yes. Y'all are great. Okay, so everybody's happy? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We really look forward to working with you over the next several months, to being back with you again, continuing to communicate with the community. And do you want to close us out or have any final words?
The Discover Paragould Facebook page will be linking to their project page, so make sure you follow that. You'll get updates. We'll get the meeting out. If you don't follow that, that's just one of the ways that we try to tell the good story of Perigold every day as well. So that will be one way that we communicate the future meetings, of course, the newspaper as well.
And if you want to sign up on the project website, you can enter your email. We'll shoot you a periodic notice or an update. We won't spam you and we won't sell your email address, but we will, if there's something important we believe you need to know, we'll shoot you out an email. It's been a beautiful day. Thank you very much. Thank you for your inputs and attentions, and have a wonderful evening.